Welcome to the Smart Driving Cars podcast. We do appreciate you taking the time. This edition is sponsored by the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. For more information, head to motoetf.com. Technical support is provided by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 corporation. I'm Fred Fishkin, along with the Faculty Chair of Autonomous Vehicle Engineering at Princeton University, Alain Kornhauser. Hi, Alain.
Hey, good morning, Fred.
Good morning, and back with us to close out the year. We're happy to have with us from Sweden, well-known consultant and publisher of The Dispatcher, Michael Sena. Great to see you, Michael.
Great to be back. Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Alain.
Great having you, Michael. End of the year, my goodness, we made it through it, maybe.
Yeah.
And he's ahead of the game. In the January edition of The Dispatcher, you lead off with some news. There's a new book on the way that you and Alain are writing, Mobility for the Non-Mobile. You have an excerpt from the introduction, and you say the book is intended to describe the preconditions for and a solution to the problem of providing mobility for the unserved and underserved. Tell us a little bit about this effort, Michael.
Well, we've had 4 years of the Smart Driving Cars Summit, and each year progressively we've gotten closer and closer to something that looks like a solution that could be implemented, could be tested. And at the end of the summit, the 2021 summit this past April, Alain presented the concept for Trenton, New Jersey, capital of New Jersey. It's gotten major support. The concept has gotten major support from the governor, recently reelected, and his administration. But what we felt we needed to do was to provide in one place the background. How did we get to where we are? Why are we even discussing this kind of solution to mobility for the non-mobile? So the first chapter, which is what I've excerpted the article in the Dispatcher from, is trying to set the stage. How can we, in this time, be suggesting a car-based, an automobile-based solution for providing mobility? So I've taken the reader from where we began to have a necessity to move. I mean, it's only been a little over maybe 150 years since people began to have to move away from maybe a 2 or maximum 3 mile walk to work or to anywhere they had to go. I mean, as in the article, I said, one of the reasons why we didn't invent cars earlier was that nobody needed them. They didn't need to travel, and even if they needed to travel, they didn't necessarily have the means to travel. Everyone didn't own a horse. Everyone didn't own a wagon. So to begin with the statement that cars did not cause sprawl, they enabled it when people began to have a need or a requirement to move from the center of cities where work was, where the action was, and where most people lived, to move away from those centers, primarily for health reasons. As more and more people moved in in the Industrial Revolution, people began to get more crowded. There were problems of sewage and waste and all kinds of things. And those who could afford it moved, but they didn't move 10, 15, 30 miles away. They moved a few miles, maximum. And I lived for a year in the first suburb of London, in Pimlico. And I walked to County Hall, where the London Eye is. I walked there and home every day. It was 2.5 kilometers. Now, that was the first suburb in London. And then gradually, as more and more people moved in, the suburbs began to move further and further out. And then gradually the trains came, and trains made it possible to move further. So the idea is that that sprawl occurred. And then in the 60s, businesses began to move out of the cities, and sprawl continued at the same time as more and more people who really couldn't afford it moved into the cities, either from the south or from other places. And this inversion occurred, where now we have people living in the center of cities where all the businesses used to be, and all the businesses now outside of the cities. And as this continued, sprawl and suburbanization began to move further and further out. So now not only have many of the people who lived in the cities, including some of those who were maybe classified as poor, have moved further into the suburbs, and the cities have become less and less, let's say, viable in terms of a combination of accessibility to work and accessibility to affordable housing. So what we're trying to do is put the people who need a job, who need to get to places like hospitals and schools and good places where they can buy food and other goods, together with a mobility solution that allows them to get there. And it is more complicated because, unfortunately, because of where everything is right now, transit systems don't help very much. Buses aren't working the way they worked back in 50, 60, 70 years ago, when people lived in one place and needed to get to work in a relatively small area. Now we've got everything is spread around. So the idea of this article is to condense the first chapter of the book. And the reason for the book is to build up to what is the solution and how is the solution going to be implemented. And in between, the chapters in between are essentially the panels that we've had and the discussions that we've had over the last 4 years on each of the components, such as, are driverless cars safe enough? Can we actually implement them? Who's going to build them? How are they going to be serviced? All of these, the details around it. And then the last solution, the last chapter being the focus on, what are we going to do in Trenton? How are we going to accomplish this? And what are the expectations?
Well, you are so good at laying out the history. Readers of the Dispatcher know this. And if you haven't been reading the Dispatcher, I'm addressing the audience here. michaellsena.com is the place to go to get hold of it. You should be reading it. The history that you're able to bring to issues is what we're going to be seeing in this book here, and then laying out really the whole need to rethink mobility.
One thing that's important here, there are two main authors, but there's a list of contributors. For example, Ken Pyle, during the last, from the time I began coming, he's been summarizing in Vioti in his blog. He's done a terrific job of doing summaries of the panel discussions that we've held. So he is a main contributor, pulling pieces out of the work that he did, summarizing the panel discussions and putting more meat around that, and building the chapters. And then there are others. Of course, there are others who were leading the panels and who have participated in the panels. We're reaching out to them. Just during the last couple of weeks, we went back to Aurora and Waymo in a panel that they were in, and asked them for some clarifications, because it wasn't exactly clear what it was that they had said, and they immediately came back and provided the detail that we needed. So this is going to be a collaborative work.
Alan?
I think that what has happened with respect to and I'm certainly not a great historian, that's for sure. But we've come from sort of a point source sort of type of living at a point, and then we evolved to more maybe a hub and a spoke sort of a way of living, all of a sudden to a network of living. And each of those sort of imply different aspects of mobility to the individual, or for the individual to get the benefit of this kind of lifestyle. So if we're just the node or the hub, you can walk it. Okay. If you're at a hub and spoke, then you can take your trolley or your bus or your subway and do it. If you become a network, it's just like the internet. All of a sudden you need new tools to do this. And the tools that we've had on the shelf have been tools that, did really well for hub and spoke. Oh my goodness. For a network, pooh. Yep. It's not pretty at all.
No.
And so all of a sudden you say to yourself, oh my goodness. And then people say, whoa, how can you fill up a 53 passenger bus? Well, you can't. Okay. So all of a sudden they say, hey, you've got to package all those people all together. Doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So in a sense, you then have the new tool, and then the new tool comes out. Oh my goodness, we have these things, these smaller entities. And the key to it is, the key to it is the affordability that's provided once you then say that the operator of each of the vehicles, then all it has to be is some sensors and some computers and some things that behave like Moore's law. And you apply Moore's law on top of this and you say, oh my goodness, this is a fundamentally new opportunity. But the opportunity now needs to be, it is an opportunity, but where can we focus it? Well, the radial systems that we built and we have out there, they're focused on people who don't drive cars. Even though what they want to do is get people out of cars, I think we could look at the data as to how well they've taken people out of cars. And if you look at the data, oh my goodness, it is nothing but UGLY. It is ugly. Okay. Not only have they not brought anybody out of cars into them, they've lost the people they had in them to cars. Oh my goodness. So all of a sudden it's why? It's because it's a hub and spoke. It doesn't serve a network. So now you have an opportunity to take something who really doesn't care where it goes in the network between which places, and when it does it, it can do it 2 o'clock in the morning just as well as it can do it at 7 o'clock in the morning or 5 o'clock at night. It doesn't care. It doesn't have to work a shift from 8-hour shift with an hour break, with a bathroom break, with a lunch break. It doesn't have lunch breaks. It doesn't have bathroom breaks. It doesn't care when it works. And we're not abusing it by not giving it a bathroom break, not giving it a lunch break, not giving it a
it'll have a refueling break.
It has a refueling break.
Right.
Okay. But in fact, we can't use these. Hey, if we could use them 24/7, it would be great. But hey, demand is, one of the things about transportation demand, it is as peaks. Peaks have always been the challenge of transportation. Always. Still a challenge here. So we're going to need we'll probably get utilization out of one of the vehicles that may be only 3 or 4 hours a day. Right now,
well, these are the kinds of things that we're going to be trying to test.
Absolutely. That's what we try to test. But if we look at our personal use of these vehicles, what's the utilization rate of that? 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, or some of them.
Well, I've used this example before. I don't use my bed 24 hours a day or even 8 or 9 hours a day, but I don't rent it out in between. So, I don't.
I'm not sure that
I don't use my fishing gear, every single day.
No, I understand. There are some things that we do want to we do want to own, but there are some things that we probably should share and do a better job at sharing. And the thing that nobody's been able to figure out is how we share our personal cars with each other, and maybe somebody's going to come up with an app to do that, Certainly Zipcar has tried and continuing to try, and a lot of other folks are continuing to try. The rental car companies are continuing to try. But my goodness, putting it out there for mobility to say, hey, walk up and use, which is the way we've used elevators. Again, the elevator analogy, I want to use it all the time, but it's a really good, to me, it's a really good one. Forget about the fact that it's linear, make it network. Who cares? Whatever. Once you're in the vehicle, you're in for the ride until you get out and you forget about it. That's the beauty of this thing. Now, whether or not you're actually going to be as good as me owning, or you, Fred, or you, Michael, owning a car, that's yet to come. But for a lot of folks, the comparison of the radial, hub and spoke, whatever mobility systems, that we've all tried to make those work as best as we possibly can. We're up against an enormous wall here. There's just nothing we can do. It's just too inflexible. It can't handle a network. So that's where we are.
Well, one before I continue here, we're enjoying the beautiful Swedish sunset behind you, Michael. It's morning as we're taping this. It's morning in New Jersey, and behind
it's
you,
actually not. It's that light you see. It's a Christmas star in the window. It's almost dark here right now. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Well, I was going to say, nice. You mean the sun's up? I mean,
it's 3:30. It's 3:30 in the afternoon, but it's almost dark. So I've got a Christmas star in front of me, and a Christmas tree over. I'm in a meeting, or say a gathering room in a condominium that we are part of outside of Stockholm, actually about 2.5 hours south of Stockholm. But it's nice. It's a nice idea.
Well, I was surprised there was light.
You've days are getting longer. The
Michael,
image I had here.
The sun is coming.
Yeah. Well, people tend to focus when they think about driverless or autonomous vehicles very often on things like climate change, traffic congestion, the vehicle, passenger, and pedestrian, the safety aspects. But you're focused here on something different, the mobility needs.
Yeah, I mean, if we tried to focus everything being equal, the economics, the basis of economics, everything being equal, economists like to and one of the things you learn as part of engineering is that you try to limit the number of variables so that you can identify which ones are the most important. If we had to study everything at one time, we'd never get anywhere. What we're going to try to do here is to focus on whether or not a driverless vehicle, however it's powered, however it's designed, whether a driverless vehicle is capable of providing a solution for the main requirements of people who don't have mobility. So, if folks say, well, is this really something that we should be doing for the climate? I do get into that in the next article in the Dispatcher. But there are so many people who are looking at all of these other issues, particularly the safety one, and this is an important one, of course, of can driverless cars be safe? Obviously, no one is going to be putting a solution in place that isn't safe. We're not going to do the kinds of things that Tesla has done, which is to use people as beta testers with their vehicles, with their software, with their ideas about videos playing when they're, even though they've taken it off, they put it out there without actually getting permission to do so. We're not going to do that. But the focus here is not on all of the other issues. It's on, is this a solution that can work? I mean, there's so many issues that are related to how people get from where they live to where they need to get picked up. How many of these do we need? Where do they have to? How can they be distributed? How can they be designed so that there's piling on graffiti, or there's no the kinds of things that happen in cities that are not even cities, in places where you have bus stops. We put up bus stops in some of the areas outside of Stockholm, and they're demolished within a couple of days. So how do you preserve the ability of these places that may be needed in order to be able to ensure that people feel safe and feel comfortable, and will use the systems? These are all the things that we need to test, and we need to work with the communities, people who are going to be using this. We need to work directly with them in order to develop a solution and then to test it. We don't have the answers right now. We don't have all the answers right now. Sorry,
the community involvement is the key piece of this, and we believe that the community involvement was the key to the welcoming. We worked on that from the beginning. We continue to work on the community involvement. Why? Because this is for the community. This is for them. This is for the folks who, it's not for us so we feel good that we think that we put something out there for somebody who knows what. This is for them. And so therefore we want to try to say, hey, we might have a couple of Lego blocks here that we think we might be able to use to put into your environment. What should they look like? What can they look like to solve your problem? Because to give you the mobility and to give you, in sense, maybe I don't know, I'm sure they're happy, become happier, of course, and to do the things that they want. So that is a fundamental key. It's the necessary condition of all of this.
Yep. Yes.
And let's make clear that while this particular project and effort is focused on Trenton, this is, as your students have shown in a podcast a week or two ago, this can be replicated in so many places.
Well,
in this country and elsewhere.
I
it goes without
think so.
saying.
Even if it couldn't, it's worthwhile trying in Trenton. But is Trenton any different than many of the other cities? What's made Trenton so darn unique? All these places have evolved the same way. The top end of the economic spectrum has evolved this way. The bottom end has been crushed. Okay, we're dealing with a bottom end that's been crushed. All right, and they just haven't been crushed in Trenton, and not all of Trenton is crushed. Okay, but many. So we're dealing with them, and we think that doing that does not preclude doing it for everybody else too. That's the amazing win aspect of all of this. It's for them and not for us. It's just realizing that we're not a network society, not just a hub and spoke. We're a network. To network, you need better interconnections. Everybody knows that. Certainly everybody at the top end of the echelon know that. And why shouldn't the mobility that's provided them, the network connection, and the top end also? Hey, we now have the opportunity. The real opportunity here is, my goodness, that can be available to everybody. Wow. And it's amazing that that everydy's not beating the path to our door here. Whatever. But,
well, they're not. I think most people don't really know that the door is there at this point, but hopefully they will soon. One thing that Trenton is like quite a number of cities. My hometown is one of them, Scranton. Both cities have lost almost half of their populations, 140,000 or so. They grew, they were viable cities, they had public transportation systems, everything worked the way they should work, and suddenly they lost the reason for being. And the population decreased, and now they've got an infrastructure that built for 140,000 with a population of closer to 70,000. And it doesn't matter if it's a city of that was 140,000, or a city like Detroit that was 2 million. Now, New York is unique, but if you break it down into Queens and Brooklyn and Staten Island, even there's similarities. New York is not Los Angeles, but if you break Los Angeles down into its neighborhoods, it's got similar issues. Watts is in Los Angeles.
I was just there. It's amazing. It's amazing how people are stuck there, just like Trenton.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So the idea is that every place isn't similar, but if we can test something in a place where it's small enough, with enough support from the people, without going into a huge city, or without going into a place like Chandler, Arizona, which is where Waymo is testing, which is, I don't want to say it's homogenous, but it's not Trenton. It's 200,000, 250,000 people, but it's a suburb of Phoenix. I mean, it's a huge, it's big. It's like Syracuse, or bigger than Syracuse, I think. Which is, a city, got a university. Chandler, Arizona, who knows where Chandler, Arizona is, but it's got a lot of people. But it's not Trenton, it's not Scranton, it's not a city that has these kinds of issues of an infrastructure of people that has it. Maybe it's lost its potential. But these cities have one thing that we need to keep in mind: the populations are not going in the direction of cities. That myth that was fostered by Henry Glazer and others that the cities are now revitalizing, this renaissance, everything's going to go back and everybody's going to live in the city. Fine, that worked for a little while, but then suddenly people realized, I can't afford this. Even people who could potentially live in a city that costs X, suddenly they're needing to pay 3x or 4x just to get a little apartment. So that whole concept isn't, we're behind that. That's so this type of solution will hopefully be able, that we can show, will be able to be used in multiple types of environments.
We'll be back with more. But first, this is a good time to remind you about our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF, symbol MOTO. To get more info, head to motoetf.com. On the website, look for the white paper. It's called The Smart Transportation Revolution. It's under the Insights and News tab. Some great information there to help you make informed decisions about investing. ETFs, as you probably know, can be a good way to spread risk with investments, maybe focus on a particular category of stocks. The website, again, is motoetf.com. We're back with more of Smart Driving Cars and our guest, the dispatcher publisher, Michael Sena. Michael, in the latest edition of the newsletter, you've got a headline that reads, "Environmental activists want to engineer a utopia." And the subheadline reads, "Utopias and democracies don't mix well."
Yeah. As often happens, I'm reading a book that was referred to me for one reason or another, then the book is that sort of got this whole thing going was Karl Popper's The Open Society and Its Enemies. I'm reading the book and pieces start falling into place. And when he comes to the point where he says Plato essentially was he was anti-democratic. I mean, do people know of Plato or think of Plato as being anti-democratic? But they do know that he was utopian, that his ideal was what was. Something starts, something was developed. It was the ideal situation. It was the ideal city. It was the ideal form. And then as time went on, it became less ideal. So he's known as a utopian. As it turns out, if you look at utopianism over the course of the last 2,500 years, it hasn't done so well. Folks who have promoted the concept of an ideal, we're there, this is the ideal, and now we're going to hold it. Now we're going to keep to it. And in order to get there, they had to develop a blueprint, a design, and we're going to achieve this. Whether it was someone who was designing the ideal city or someone who was designing the ideal country, like Marx and Lenin. And it's sort of the penny dropped. The folks who are saying, we have to do this now. You have to stop driving cars. You have to stop eating meat. You have to stop. We have to achieve the ideal tomorrow. Otherwise, it's all over. We're not going to be able to continue living. I'm 16, 17, 18 years old, and I want to be able to do the things that my parents did 15, 20 years ago without having to worry that the planet is not going to be able to sustain me. So you have to do everything possible right now. Extinction Rebellion, you have to do it now. We're going to put our bodies in the intersections, and we're going to stop traffic. You need to do it now, not tomorrow. And then he talked about the incrementalism, the gradual approach to engineering, something that you build up. You get information, and you make suggestions. You incrementally work toward a solution, and eventually, as a result of all the work that you've done, you come to a solution that includes compromise. It includes design changes along the way, and this takes time. COP26 means this was the 26th meeting that they had, the first one being in Berlin 26 meetings ago. And we're not there yet. The little kid sitting in the back of the car saying, aren't we there yet? And the father saying, we have to drive there. It's not just on the other side of the fence. We have to drive 2 hours to get to grandma's. So after 2 hours, we'll be there. And I have to drive the car there. And if you're making a lot of noise back there, you're distracting me. And so I can't do my job. It's exactly the same thing with the utopians fighting against the people who are trying to do their job. And that's what I've put forward in this article. It was a Popper who, he wasn't talking about COP26. He wasn't talking about global warming and climate change and all this other stuff. But the concept of people working hard, diligently, trying to come up with good solutions that will allow us to continue to live on this planet, versus those who saying, you have to stop. We've got the solution. It's electric cars. It's vegetarianism. It's everything that the folks who are protesting say it is, without them knowing having the slightest idea of whether all that's going to work. That's what this article is.
So, Michael, I'm sure this is going to make you popular with all of the people that are whatever, riding in the streets, or I guess we don't have riding in the streets.
Yeah, we do. I mean, they were pretty riotous. I mean, the people, every time they show up at the COP meetings, they're out there. I mean, the folks I don't want to mention, they're out there.
Yeah, they are. So yes, so that's what makes life exciting, I guess, in some sense. I guess it also, to me, I guess I've stopped wanting perfection myself. I think perfection's kind of nice. My sort of argument against perfection is that it requires an objective function. I guess that's because I'm an optimizer. I have to write an equation for an objective function, and it's going to have variables in there with coefficients, and whether or not it's squared, the sine, or hyperbolic cosine, or who knows what function of a function of the da. I mean, we can make them fancy schmancy and whatever. And But the ones that we have in our particular brain that really determine, what we think is best for each of us, we're all different. And in some sense, vive la différence. It would be really boring if we were all the same. I mean, it would be totally boring. I mean, can you imagine how boring? Totally. And so it really is wonderful that we're all different. But because we're all different, there does there could exist, but I'll claim there does not exist a solution that would be perfect for everybody. Because our objectives are different, our views are different, our perspectives are different, our interests are different. Da, 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 da. And so what we require is sort of we require a solution that is sort of kind of good for all of us, you know, and maybe best for, of course, me. Of course, I would want that, but that'd be that. I mean, I wouldn't deserve that. So what we should be doing is looking for good solutions, things that are good, things that are whatever, and not and that's not utopia, because utopia is supposedly, this thing that is best for everybody. Come on, that's not even you shouldn't even be able to use that string of words together, because it's not achievable. Okay.
But I mean, the fact is that over the course of history, over at least the last 2,500 years from the time of Plato, people have been developing concepts of a utopia.
Yeah.
And there are so-called philosophers like Hegel,
Yeah.
who have helped dictators, kings,
Sure. Hey,
to say that we have the idea, we have the ultimate solution, this is how it can be, and now everybody just get in line and do it.
If I'm big enough narcissist and I'm so self-focused on what's in my brain, I think I can define what is best for me. Okay. And if I then think I have the power to then impart it on each of you, then that's where we get to, that concept of that would be my utopia. And that's where people get themselves into trouble, right? I mean, once they start, I think, as opposed to looking around and saying, hey, really, what's really somewhat good enough for me, and good for Michael, good for Fred, good for everybody, good for you, the listener. And let's find a solution that kind of makes us all kind of happy, as opposed to happiness, the happiest that I can possibly be.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how we get ourselves into trouble. Well, that's how we were designed, or that's how, this particular combination of cells and so on to do, and things up here sort of think, that's what we're dealing with here.
The purpose of the article was to encourage the people who are working on this, whether they're just working on their own or whether they're working with COP, the UN organizations, to continue an incremental approach. We're going to find solutions to this, and not to ignore the utopians.
Sure.
Extinction Rebellion groups, the Fridays for the Future group, but not to let them define the agenda. It's not for them to define the agenda. That's the purpose.
Yep.
Michael, you also take a look at the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act and the still pending Build Back Better Act, right?
Yeah,
and you point out until cars fly, we will need the roads and bridges here. Yeah. And it's so related to what we were just talking about, and the debate about the incremental approaches and what's going to get passed, what isn't going to get passed here.
Well, honestly, I wrote that because I needed to understand it, and because trying to get the information out of different sources, news sources, whether it's a good source like The Economist or newspapers, trying to understand how this all happened and where it is right now, and who's on what base, and who's batting and who's pitching. I couldn't get all of that, so I had to sit down and put all the pieces together. And as a result, hopefully, those who are reading it will understand where we are right now. We've got the infrastructure bill, or the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, has been passed. It's now part of the law, and the Build Back Better hasn't. It was due to go to a vote, and the senator, we can say what we want about him. He's a Democrat. He's from the state of West Virginia. I think this individual is actually thinking about a lot of things that people aren't giving him credit for thinking about. And it's not just his constituency. It's not just his future as a am I going to get voted in or voted out senator again? I think he's been around long enough to understand what the issues really are. And people, the so-called progressives who are lambasting him, and Bernie, my love, and Elizabeth Warren, just really giving him the bile that's been poured on him. They haven't really gone back and understood what it is where the problem is. It's this is a lot of money, and is it being put in places where it needs to be put, and could this have been done better? As people are saying, well, we told you, if you had separated these, if we told you that if you separated these two and made one bill infrastructure and one bill the so-called Build Back Better, then we might get the infrastructure, but we're not going to get the other one, and we really want the other one. So we should have held out and made it one vote. Well, of course, that wouldn't have passed. It wouldn't have even gotten through the House. Never mind the Senate. So it's. I didn't write the article. I didn't write this particular article to make any statements or give any judgments. It's mainly to say this is what's been happening. And what's happened now is the one vote they absolutely need, because they had to have all Democratic senators voting in favor of it, they don't have. So now the vote on the Build Back Better, which includes all of the funding for supporting electric cars. In this, in the article, I've said that Elon Musk has dissed this entire thing. He says, don't pass this bill because we shouldn't be investing public money in charging networks. We built our charging networks. We didn't use public money. Well, the fact is, he did use public money because he was getting money from the government, separately by the government supporting people buying his electric cars. He got quite a bit of money, and that's a whole other issue. But it's the likelihood of this thing passing in its present form is very, very small. Well,
I know you love fishing, Michael, so I'm going to open up a can of worms here. Mm-hmm. Alain, in the last podcast we did, we spoke about Elon Musk being in hot water and Tesla being in hot water over this idea of allowing drivers to play video games. And right after you criticized him, he changed his mind. So you have quite an impact here. And Michael, you mentioned this as well.
Yeah, right.
Honestly, I said this, I don't think he changed his mind. I think the adult somewhere in that companies and on the board, there is at least one adult who managed to convince at least people who were in their late adolescence that they had to do this. They had to make this concession to the government in order to get the government at least temporarily or off their backs, because this was absolutely stupid. I mean, the timing of this, throwing this out,
it's indefensible, I suppose. And
totally. I mean, the fact that they allowed this to happen. What are you thinking? What are you possibly? You've got Lena Khan, who's just come in. She's going for your jugular, and you've got all of the other folks. NHTSA is now finally has gotten some people in there who are focused on this issue. Alain, they haven't done anything about Tesla. That's my complaint. They have not done a single thing to keep Tesla from using people as beta people buying their cars and using them as beta testers. That is just not something they should have been doing. They should have been stopped, and they haven't. But now people are looking at them. What do? They do an over-the-air update to allow people to play videos on their cars. Yeah, they took it off because if they didn't, this is the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life. Who is running that ship?
Yeah, you really. I personally was amazed that in some sense they were permitted originally to put a 17-inch screen in the car. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, you and I, Michael, we sort of pioneered the turn-by-turn navigation stuff, and I could, when
You did.
yeah. But
Yeah.
when we were putting that out there, we wanted people to basically be able to, at a glance, in just a couple of cognitive cycles, get the fundamental information about what they should be doing next.
Yep.
In driving, instead of looking at a map or whatever. But it required a map, and we were so focused on making sure that it be placed and it be where somebody would be, almost in peripheral vision, a quick glance, and they got it. Okay, got the information. But of course, I would like to say that brought screens into cars. And then people had a choice. Once you had a screen, they could have Copilot in there so they could get the information as a glance and not want to look at it any more than a glance, or play videos. We got crushed. Because if you allowed them to play videos on their cars, they would play video. They wouldn't care about whether or not they knew where in hell they were going. Yep. They wanted to watch the damn video. Boom. I mean, oh my goodness,
yeah.
And then comes a 17-inch screen. And, I'm a computer graphics guy. Oh my goodness, it was the greatest screen. I mean, it was like wonder. I mean, I want to go down the road like this the whole time, just watching the sucker. But somehow it's okay. And then you can touch this and touch that, and autoplay and Apple Play and what play and what to play and blah, blah, play. And then, and you wonder why so many people die.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
We're not wondering. We know why.
Well,
we know why the curve has gone back up. We know why the curve has gone back up. We
know, and then all of a sudden you're not gonna play video games. Oh man, I'm gonna be now down in my parents' basement while I'm driving down the 405 in LA playing video games. I mean, are you joking? I mean, are you joking? Now, please have the car be able to drive itself as much as you can. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
But it doesn't. You got to pay attention. So you can't be looking at the 17-inch screen.
Here's my question.
What?
The various committees, various governmental committees, have had Zuckerberg, they've had Bezos, they've had Bill Gates, they've had everybody, but they haven't had Elon. The musketeer hasn't had to sit there and someone say to him, "What are you thinking? What's in your head?" Why is that? Why is that the case?
Well, I think they should invite him, but I think that the man deserves his Time Person of the Year award. I think he's done so much, I think, fundamental good. But boy, I mean, he's a bimodal distribution. He has a lot of good, and there are some things that, my goodness, what's he doing? And they just They really don't make sense. Yes, if you assume that every driver of a Tesla is going to be a good citizen, a a a a a, a good driver, a conscientious person, doesn't misbehave, then of course all the things you put in there are fantastic. They will pay attention when full self-driving is on. When you give them stupid summon, they won't send their car out on the street and cross and whatever and play games with it. They'll just use it to get in and out of the garage. Absolutely. So if you believe that all your customers are all these goody two shoes, then great. But unfortunately, no. Maybe it's a very large percentage of your customers, but there are some on the end of the distribution that take this and, of course, watch the 17-inch screen and play video games while they're going down the 405. And that puts us in danger. Darn it. You haven't taken care of the tail of the distribution, Elon. You're that smart. Deal with the tail of the distribution.
Yeah, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't care if it's 99%. I don't really care if it's 99%. I don't put brakes on 99% of my cars and not on one.
Yeah, no,
I don't leave the brakes off 1% of my cars. If I'm a car manufacturer, my responsibility is not necessarily to the driver. As I said in this article, the responsibility is to everybody else.
Absolutely.
As I said, if somebody wants to take this car and kill themselves, knock yourself out. Do it. But don't take anybody else along with you. I can't decide whether the person in that car is going to look at the video while he's driving and not look at the road and drive into me. I can't decide that. But someone who puts that in front of that person, who gives them that opportunity to do what they've been doing with so-called self-driving and full whatever it is, full self-driving and autopilot, that's their responsibility. They should never have ever been allowed to do that. That's my opinion. I mean, I've got an opinion, and then it's my newsletter, so I can write.
No, of course you can. And whether or not they allowed or not allowed, Elon shouldn't have done it. He shouldn't have. He's the one who could disallow it. He can take it off. Okay.
Yeah, because as we've seen in his company, he makes the decisions. It's Elon, or it's either Elon's way or the highway, because there are an awful lot of people out there who used to work at Muskerville, at Tesla. They're doing good things. We've got one here at Northvolt, who's developing the Northvolt, the battery factory. They're all over the place. They've done great work. Yeah. And I think I mentioned many of them in the article that I wrote a few months ago in the Dispatcher, just about how things have occurred and how things have evolved inside, using that wonderful book that was written by the New York Times author.
Yes.
I was going to say that the phone makers have been grappling for years with, and the operating system makers have grappled for years with ways to keep people from being able to look at their phones while they're driving, unsuccessfully, because they can't distinguish who's the passenger and who's the driver. That's one of the things that they haven't been able to tackle. But they do have things like Android Auto that, limits the screen and what you can do and such. But at least they're making an effort. Here, it seems like Musk was going in the opposite direction until he was slapped, I suppose.
Well, Fred, you're giving them a lot of credit. They could do a lot more. They know so much more about what's going on in the car. Okay. They don't have to ask me if I'm driving. Okay. They know if I'm driving. All right. Mm-hmm. They have a camera there. They can see me. They can do that. They have not done enough. Okay. Excuse me. All right. They need to do more. So if they really wanted to shut it down, they could, because they have enough information going on there that they do know way out to the several 999s out there. So please.
So should there be a regulation then that has to be implemented, that the phones have to include
I'd
that
say
technology?
the regulations aren't there. They should do it as a conscientious public entity. This is why, I don't think it's the government that should tell Elon necessarily what to do. Elon needs to get a clue.
But the
Elon
government
needs to do it.
now.
Okay?
Wait a minute now. We don't have type we don't have type approval in the United States, but we have
Yeah.
type approval in many places, including all over Europe. And the fact is that in order to put your car on the road, that car has to be type approved. That's why most of the Chinese cars aren't on the road, because they can't pass the type approval. And in the United States, we certify that the car meets these requirements. There have to be requirements for it to meet. Otherwise, you could put anything out there.
Right.
What I've said is that Elon Musk and Tesla has been putting anything out there without acknowledging the fact that there are requirements that they do have to meet. The idea of putting a video, that isn't even, it's not allowed. But he did it without asking anybody. It's out there. And oh yeah, I'm a great guy because now I can take it back. I've got this wonderful OTA. OTA works in two directions. The Lord giveth, the Lord taketh away. I'm taking it away now. I'm a great guy. No, you should never put it there in the first place. I'm going to slap your hand anyway.
Okay.
So
I want to slap his hand too. I mean, I agree with you. He is still a great guy, but but he has flaws, and we're going to whack him on every one of the flaws that we can, because he has an enormous amount of power.
That's for sure.
He has an enormous amount of power, and I guess I would like to understand. He doesn't have to explain why he does some of these things that he does. Okay.
I started the article out. He's got an empathy screw loose in his head.
There was a quote, I think, from his brother
I'm not
online.
that brutal. Okay. No. Well,
what was the quote, Fred?
I would have to look up exactly what it was, but there was a quote from his brother online that I saw this morning, talking about him not being as empathetic.
His brother said that?
Yeah,
Did he read the dispatcher?
I believe so.
Yeah.
Did he read the dispatcher? I mean, was
maybe?
No. Well, we all have. I don't have much empathy. I don't have much empathy either. I'm not, my wife, man, she has 102% empathy. I am.
Well, one other headline we want to touch on today: a post from Waymo online that reads, "We're pleased to work with Geely as we integrate the Waymo driver into a version of their new mobility-focused all-electric Zeekr vehicle." And then they go on to say, "Designed in Sweden for riders first."
I mean, I saw that and saw Brad Templeton's post on that, and I looked at it, my eyes rolled, but I think Michael is bailing me out, and so I'm not as displeased as I was when I first read it. Michael.
I think that Waymo has agreements with lots of people. They've tested lots of different makers of cars over the years, and this sounds like this is another opportunity. There's a car out there, let's test it and put the Waymo beanie on top and see how it looks. And the same is true with Geely. Chairman Li Shufu has done a great job of following let's say he's learned the lesson of monopoly. Don't spread your investments around. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. And he's got plenty of baskets out there, from Volvo cars to Volvo trucks and Daimler, and just lots of folks, lots of different companies. So it's nice that they've got an agreement, but I don't think it's anything of earth shattering or anything that's going to keep the folks at GM and Ford up, or Stellantis up late at night. I think they all have cars that are at least, on paper, something that does exactly what this car does. And this car is, in fact, on paper. It's not yet something that's out there. So.
Yeah, I think on top of that, I think maybe Waymo is looking to get an investment from somebody else, and that's why they put the darn thing out. Seems to me they have an announcement of having an order in, or an opportunity to buy how many, 80,000 is it, Pacificas. They haven't bought, or is it 60,000? I forgot what the number was, 60 or 80,000. I don't think they've executed on that agreement. They had an agreement to buy 20,000 Jaguars or something like that. Doesn't seem like they have all that many vehicles out there running around in Chandler, Arizona. So they're piddling around in San Francisco and Los Angeles and mapping New York City and parking some vehicles in New Jersey. I haven't seen any of them show up in Trenton.
But come on down.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure to what extent Waymo's, dead in the water right now. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what's going on. Of course, I don't know. I don't want to know anything that's not made, that hasn't been made public. They made this public. I wonder why. Maybe they have. This is a way to get Google into China or something like that, because now they're going to be on a Chinese skateboard, and they'll be able to have Waymo be in China and bring Google with it. I don't know. Maybe there's a bigger play on that. Whatever, but I think, Michael, you sort of assuaged me this morning a little bit by saying, this is just one of many announcements, and who knows what. As I look at the design, and I'm not a car designer, it was the opportunity to have a vehicle without a driver, with only passengers, because this is the only way that this thing is successful. Okay, if you're going to have all those gizmos on a car and you have to have a driver, you have to have an attendant, it can't scale. It can't be a business. It can't become Google. It can't become Facebook. It can't explode. It can't serve a network. Okay, it doesn't have the connectivity. So give it up. All right. So if you're really going to do that, if you're really going to solve the network problem of mobility, which might give you an opportunity to scale, which is, of course, what Uber thought it was going to be, how it was going to be able to scale, which is what Lyft thought it was going to be able to scale if it did that, which ran into trouble, and because it couldn't get to the point where it could remove the driver. Okay, removing the driver is key. Again, we would not have the high rises that we would have if we didn't remove the elevator operator out of the elevator. Okay, it wouldn't have happened. Wouldn't have happened. I don't see how you could afford it. There would have been another more affordable solution that would have come out. Whatever, it wouldn't have happened. And so, if you want this one to happen, then design the vehicle realizing that that's the case. And if a level floor, which a level floor is really important if you're going to have multiple people in there coming maybe in and out, and there's a lot of in and outs, elevators have level floors. All right, then the configuration inside the vehicle is somewhat different. Doors. What's important in all transit vehicles forever, irrespective of whether they're dealing with the hub or the hub and the spoke, are doors. What they have for doors on this thing, you got to think about your doors a little bit better, okay? And deal with that. And I don't know. Again, a lot of better car designers. People deal with design of cars, but those are kind of the fundamentals. And then the seats, whether they recline or whatever, what are the trip lengths in these things going to be? They're the network connections are relatively, the interest is to get between many places and not too distant places. Look at how people use their cars. Oh yeah, we talk about the person who commutes, an hour and a half each way and so on. That's the tail of the distribution. Most of the folks are down there in their cars. They run to the store and back. They run to church and synagogue and mosque and back. They go shoot hoops. They go to the gym. They go to the doctor. They go visit a friend. They go pick up a sandwich. Okay, that's what they use it for. These are short distance things, and I don't know, maybe.
With that, it sort of sounds like to me we've come full circle here.
We've come full circle.
And Michael, we really want to thank you again for taking the time to join us. Always great. Love your insights.
My pleasure.
Thank you to our sponsor, the Smart ETF's Smart Transportation and Technology ETF. The ticker symbol for the ETF is MOTO, and more info is available at motoetf.com. Technical support is provided by CARTS, the Corporation for Automated Road Transportation Safety, a 501c3 corporation. You can find us once again at smartdrivingcar.com, also on Anchor FM, Spotify, TuneIn, Apple, Google, Spreaker, wherever you get podcasts from, and smart speakers can play us too. You can find my tech reports at techstination.com. I'm Fred Fishkin along with Alain Kornhauser. Thank you for listening or watching. Have a safe, happy, and healthy year ahead.
Happy New Year to everybody. A little bit early, but Happy New Year. Let's look for 2022. Actually, 2021 wasn't all that bad.
It'd been worse.